Hi, welcome to NEMI Library's first ever video. I'm Gloria Goodwill-Alick. I work at NEMI Public Library, and we're very happy to be introducing the NEMI Seed Lending Library this fall. The Seed Library is run by and housed at NEMI Public Library, 50 Meredith Street West in Little Current. In this video, you'll see a recording of an information session introducing the NEMI Seed Library and covering the basics of seed saving. This session was hosted via Zoom in October 2020. I will cover how to use the NEMI Seed Library, and Mary Yett will cover the basics of seed saving. Mary is a vet and permaculturist from Tecuma with a passion for the botanical world, and we were delighted to have her share that passion with us. You will also see a small group of local gardeners who attended the session: Gail, Glenna, Eleanor, Gary, and Pam. Thanks to these individuals for their participation. For more information about the NEMI Seed Library, links to more information on seed saving, and to access the seed donation form, visit our website, nemi.olsn.ca. You'll find the link in the video description. And have an idea of how a seed library works. So people donate seeds, usually in the fall when there are seeds. And then in the spring, you can come and borrow seeds that other people have donated. You'll be able to go through. On the envelopes, we just have a condensed version of the information that's on the form, the Latin name, the variety, where it's from, and whether or not it's easy to save that seed, because it's important when you take the seed that you know how hard it's going to be to set up a form we have. And you can get this form to donate seeds online or at the library. It is two-sided. It's quite comprehensive, but we need enough info. Our library won't be a success if people are getting seeds that don't give them fruit. So, you know, there are things like the Latin name of the plant, and if you don't know that, we can help you find it at the library. The name and the variety. So if Pam was talking about the seed variety, the tomato, she has no idea where it came from or what kind it is. So this would be a hard one. We need to know, you know, things like, was the seed a hybrid? And how far away you grow it from other plants of the same variety, things like that, just so that we can tell whether or not, you know, some things like squash are incredibly hard to save seeds from because they cross-pollinate so well. And if you've ever, you know, well, one, if your compost pile has ever grown a squash seed, yeah, they're all—
I got them too this year.
Yeah, at my house, all the ones in the squash, they're all some version of spaghetti squash. Spaghetti squash must have really strong genes because everything, like, well, this is kind of like a spaghetti squash mixed with this one, and this is spaghetti squash mixed with this. So we do have to be careful about that, and that's why we're off asking for so much information when we ask for seeds. So other thing is to make sure that the seeds are less than 2 years old when you donate them, that the seed comes from a plant that was self-pollinating, open pollinated and organically grown, and that the seed has been adequately dried. So that's where knowing how to save the seed comes in, and making sure that they were dried so that they have a shelf life that's long enough to be able to use them. And then in the spring, when you're looking for seeds, Glenna, you have a question?
Oh, is this vegetables only or flowers, everything? Okay.
And flowers are so much easier because if they cross with another flower of the same kind, it's just going to be a beautiful mystery of what it's going to look like. So, you know, that's easier. And also lots of flowers are easy to, you know, we can all donate all the nigella and hollyhocks and poppy seeds, right? That the wind doesn't take from us. So in the spring, you can come in and look through what we have, and you'll be able to see just at a glance what the name is and what variety, and also I think on the envelope, I don't have one here, it says like, what did you like about this? So that you have some idea of like what the characteristic was that the person liked. And you can grow it. So then when you're growing them, you just need to reserve, you know, a plant or even 1 or 2 tomatoes if you're growing tomatoes to save the seed from, to return to the library. We ask that you try to return up to 10 times as many seeds as you took. This is to account for seeds that didn't save well. And it also helps us grow the library without having to purchase anything. So this way you bring back 10 times, and then next year 10 more people can borrow from the library seeds to grow that plant, and we don't have to purchase anything. And it helps us to go through the stock, because every 2 years we're going to have to get rid of things that are 2 years old. So Glenna?
Sorry. Is that we're supposed to say whether it's a hybrid or not? Like if I got seeds from somebody 5 years ago, like how do I know?
Yeah, if you've had it for 5 years, then you can just put I don't know, and you can write that in, like that you've had this seed and have been growing. If you've been growing it from seed for 5 years, then we would hope
no longer a hybrid at that point.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right.
So, okay. All right. Pam, yeah.
Are there specific envelopes, or and how many seeds would we put in an envelope?
Yeah. We do have specific envelopes at the library. If you're printing off the form and just want to throw them in an envelope at home so that you don't have to like transfer, that's fine, and we'll switch them over. How many seeds? I'm not sure. A pinch gets you quite far. What do you feel comfortable donating out of what you have? So
to be pretty plentiful.
Yeah. Exactly. It can be, right? Because, you know, one tomato is going to get you more than enough seeds for next year. So, yeah, whatever you feel you can part with.
And I was also wondering about the lettuce seeds. Do you have to take the little fluffy things off of them? Or is it okay to have them in the envelope?
I have no idea. I think we need to ask Mary that one.
Okay.
They plant fine with the fluffy things on them.
Okay.
If you buy commercial seed, it'll be defluffed. So that way but you know, one lettuce plant gives you what, 1,000 seeds. So just put a whole bunch in there, because some of the things attached to the fluff won't be viable. Like there's sometimes fluff is already detached and it looks like it has a little seed, but it doesn't. Just put a whole bunch in and it'll be fine.
All right. This spring I had the fluff and the seeds, and I just kind of sprinkled them all over, and I got tons of lettuce.
It works fine, and lettuce needs light to germinate, and the fluff helps keep it, part of it, to where it gets light. So
okay, well, I'm done. If anybody has any more questions about the seed library?
You probably said this before I got here, but can anyone from the island use it, or is it just for NEMI residents?
So anyone can donate it to it, but members of the library can borrow from it, is what we're saying at this point.
Good to know.
So if you're outside, it is $25 a year to belong to our library. If you're using it for other things, that's, you know, probably okay, but if you're not, it might not be worth it just for seeds. All right.
Maybe they'll consider a seed library membership down the road.
Yeah, I know. I think we're gonna have to figure something out there, but yeah, this is where we're at right now.
Have you already done it 1 year?
No, this is our first year. This is the first time we're doing collecting seeds.
It's kind of exciting, Gloria. I'm so glad you're doing that.
Thanks. It was Kathy, our new CEO at the library. It was her idea. I mean, I would never have thought of doing it, because I just wouldn't have thought that it would, you know, I don't know. Do you know what I mean?
We've had great success with it. I think we will too.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, Mary, would you like to go ahead and
yes,
talk about saving seeds?
Saving. one thing, if I only do one thing, if you want to save seeds, if you get a copy of this, is that showing backwards? It is on my screen, but it might be showing on yours.
No, it's good.
Okay, yeah.
This is, and I can put it in the notes before we leave. This is Seeds of Diversity Canada, which is a wonderful organization, and it's all about saving heritage seeds. If you belong to it, they have their own seed. It's not a lending library per se, but the members save seeds of rare or just common, and that would include things like tubers for sunchokes and, you know, peanuts and whatever as well. And you can write, you get a big thick book with hundreds of entries. Like the tomatoes alone, there must be 300 entries, and it will say, you know, Gold Rush tomato from Montreal, another bee, that tell you where they're from. And then you can send them a small amount for shipping. I can't remember what it is. It's like $3 or something. And they even use Canadian Tire money if you want. And then they ship you the seed. And with the and then members can post whatever seeds they have. It's a wonderful organization, been going on for a long time. They have published this book, and it's called How to Save Your Own Seeds, a handbook for home seed production. It's the best I've ever, and I have many books on the subject. This is the best. It's just a little thing. That's not very big. And what they've done is they've organized it very logically by botanical family, because how you have to save seeds varies on botany, right? And so they've started out with the Apiaceae, the carrot family, you know, like, you know, this is the table of contents. And then it talks about the peculiarities of the carrot family. For instance, most of them are biennial. So if you want to save carrot seed, you won't get it the first year. You have to either dig up the carrot and put it in your cold cellar all winter, or leave it in the ground with a whole bunch of mulch on top of it, and then it'll produce seed the next year. So if you want to pick out, you know, 2 or 3 carrots, be lots of seed from that, and just put a big pile of leaves on top, or and some branches on top of that, maybe then you get very easy seed. Yes, Gloria.
What about cross-pollination with wild carrots?
Well, then that's the next thing. They have very good tips for cross-pollination. And so because some things like scarlet runner beans, you have to be a kilometer away from any other scarlet runner beans to have not be pure variety. Some people are okay with land races, which just means it's not a pure variety. It's unnamed. It's just what I grow on my farm year after year, saving the seed. And if you're not trying to give it to somebody else, or put it in the seed library with a label, or you can just put a local landrace label on it, which is legitimate too. Like my peas, they're a mix of edible potted peas, but they're great. And I like the mix because I'll have some early ripener, some mid-season, some late season. And I don't care about name variety. Some people are more into that. But an Apiaceae, just for example, I have to look it up here. It has a little botany basics too, very simple, but very easy to understand. Carrot. And Queen Anne's lace is actually the same species. So that makes it hard. If you have any Queen Anne's lace around, it'll pollinate your carrots. So yeah. I know it's in here. I'd have to look it up better, but
where do you get this book?
You have to order it from Seeds of Diversity.
Okay.
And this is its 5th edition, and they may have a more recent edition even after this. They have to keep reprinting it. It's been popular. Seeds of Diversity, www.seeds.ca.
Thank you.
And yeah, it's a very good organization. So that's the main thing I wanted to start with, is that the different botanical families have different requirements. And some of them are hard to save seed from. Squash, like she said, is a good example. I have a bunch of, it's technically called a squash thang. Just means a mutt, a mix. I had, this is another plug. I have 50 squash, big squash I'd like to give away if anybody wants some. This year, the garden went a little bit crazy.
Mm-hmm.
But they'll, if you want to save seed from a squash plant, you have to find a female flower before it opens out, when it's still a bud. You pick off the petals, and then you go find a male from the plant that you want to get it, and bring the male over and rub them together to do a little sex act. And then you have to cover that with a very fine mesh that won't let in any pollen, and make a little pouch and tie a string around the bottom until the flower falls off, and then you can remove it. So that's very, you know, specific. And you can say, like, these are perfectly nice squash I have, and they're kind of pumpkin Hubbard crossed with some other mystery thing. But that's what you have to do for them. Yes, Gloria. Sorry.
It's Glenna. I got some Delicata squash from, is that how you pronounce it?
Uh-huh.
Okay. It grew out of my compost.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if I take seed from that, am I apt to get something entirely different next year?
You probably are. The first year, the fruit will be phenotypically like the mama plant.
Okay.
But the seeds inside are going to be a mix of whatever dad pollen floated in. Now, there's 3 different species of plants we call squash: Cucurbita pepo, Cucurbita maxima, and machata. And you can have in your garden, like I'm don't have a lot of places near me. You can have just the variety. You can have as many 3, one of each of those species in your garden, and then you can save those seeds. A zucchini will not pollinate a Hubbard squash because they're different species. And you have to kind of look up and not all seed catalogs say the species. You often have to look it up online. So if you have 1 maxima, 1 machata, and 1 pepo in your garden, or one variety, you have more than 1 plant, then, and you don't have neighboring, if you're in the city, that might not work because you might have a neighbor's garden. If you're out in the country, it probably would work, like for, you know, Pam and Gary, it'd not be near enough you to pollinate, things like that. And then you can keep your zucchinis or whatever seed from that.
Mm. Yeah, I saved some zucchini seed, but I'm not even sure what kind of zucchini it is because I got a plant from somebody else and it produced nice zucchini. So I'm going to take my chances.
Sure, I think that's very reasonable. Take your chances, and you might develop your own landrace. So it's very easy to do. A landrace is just something that produces your from seed and is suited to your local situation. Yeah.
With squashes, how far away would your neighbors have to be to
and again, I have to always look that up, and it varies. Let's see, page 27, I might have a list here. It's pretty far. 800 meters.
Oh, that's not bad.
That's not too bad.
No.
Some of them are kilometers. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And other members of that family, like cucumbers, are a little bit different, but they still, no, I'm just looking up here, 800 meters for cucumber too. And melons, which is a different species, probably be pretty similar. That's the lovely thing about this book, is you can really look that up. You can also just Google it. How far apart, if you have, you know, I want to grow melons, how far apart do you have to grow them? And it'll pop up most of the time. Not all the information online is, you know, reliable, but a lot of it is for this kind of thing. One thing you can't assume is reliable is how far north it grows, because there's all kinds of bad information about that in my experience. And so the summer squash, which includes acorn and stuff, is a pepo. So you just have to, this book would explain it to you super simply. That's honestly, I can't emphasize enough how practical this is. Or just, you know, accept the fact that you're going to have some interesting combinations. All the squash is going to be yummy that you produce. You won't know what to call it. You don't know, you know, what to expect. Yes, Gail?
I was going to suggest maybe the library would buy 10 of them and jack up the price, and we'll buy them directly from you.
That's a good idea.
Sounds like a great book.
Mhm.
And
And it wasn't terribly expensive. I had it a long time. It might have been $15 or something.
Mhm.
You know.
I would,
Mhm. And if you had that at the library, you could bump up the price just a bit and have it be a fundraiser for the
I said
library.
fundraiser, absolutely. There, you got 3 orders already, Gloria.
Yeah.
Anna, Eleanor, and I.
That's a great idea. That's a great idea.
I'm sure some of the garden group would want one.
Yes, yes, I bet they would. There's such a growing interest in this sort of thing that, and many hybrids, if you save the seed, according to this, you won't get the same hybrid, but it'll still be pretty good. Like a hybrid, you could take a hybrid tomato and dehybridize it just by growing it in your garden for a few years, using these principles of seed saving, and it'll have F1, F2 generations that won't be homozygous anymore. They'll be heterozygous. To have a hybrid it's just the mama and daddy cross and make something new, and that's the F1 generation, and that's a hybrid. The next generation, the F2 generation, the genes are gonna resort, and it's no longer technically a hybrid. But you can often find something, you have a favorite variety that you've been buying from a seed catalog, you can experiment and try saving seed from it. You have to know things like, wild carrot or cross-pollinate tame carrots. You have to look it up, that species, and see if there's anything you need to know. Corn is another one that's pretty hard to save seed from, because corn has genetic suppression problems where you have to save a large variety of corn or it declines very quickly. So you need to have like 200 plants per generation, or it's just gonna fizzle out. Yes, Eleanor.
Out of curiosity, parsnip, are they biannual?
Yes, they are. And parsnip is pretty easy to save.
Oh,
So
okay.
basically, you just pick a couple of your, if you scrape the soil away and look, oh, that's a big one, that's going to be a nice one. Just leave it in there. And then if you're, like the little current, there's bags of leaves by the side of the road all over the place in the fall, put one of those on top of it after it's died down. And I'm sorry?
I constantly steal other people's bags of leaves.
I do too. I've done as many as 500 a year. It's awesome what society throws away that's so valuable. Our society doesn't value a lot of things that really have value, instead of valuing plastic.
I do tend to leave some parsnips in the ground over winter, because then they're sweeter the next in the.
That's true. And if you're already doing it, just don't dig up one or two and they'll flower.
Thank you. Yep.
You'll get seeds. Yeah, parsnip's easy and a very good one to do. So some of the other more difficult, I just to tell you what I wouldn't even try, like corn. That's hard. Corn, squash you can do. It's a little tedious, but it's doable. But the ones that I find easy, we're going to talk about 3 easy species. Tomatoes, everybody's favorite, and the Seeds of Diversity. I think like 2/3 of their book is different tomatoes, like hundreds of varieties. Their annual, you have to join the society to get that thing every year. Tomatoes they tend to self-pollinate pretty much about 90% of the time. There's going to be that 10% odd thing. Yes, Glenda?
What's your favorite tomato? Do you have one?
Amish paste.
Amish paste?
It is a paste tomato, but it's a big paste tomato, like this big. And the plants, I like indeterminates. Determinate tomatoes, you just don't get the production. You're wasting a lot of your square footage in your garden. It's a big plant, 6 to 8 feet, produces vigorously right up to frost. And it just, the flavor is excellent. It's has no diseases, none of this wilt stuff and mold, unless it's really bad conditions. And you have to stake it. But when you go to can it, or I dry my tomatoes. I don't can tomatoes anymore. I dry all my tomatoes because the flavor is superb and it uses less electricity and less storage space.
How many of those would you grow in a year? How many of those plants?
Well, I probably 6, 5 or 6. And you just All you need to stake them is you just have like, you can make a teepee out of some old branches or something simple. It doesn't have to be fancy. You don't have to go buy stakes.
Okay.
You just have to keep them up off the ground so that the bugs don't eat your tomatoes.
And you said that's indeterminate?
Yes. Do you know the difference between determinate and indeterminate? I should probably
Yeah.
explain some terms.
I know.
Determinate, well, just for other people, determinate, it tends to be a little bit smaller plant, but all the fruits ripen at one time and then the plant's done.
Mm.
As a determinate, and that's good for commercial operations that want to go through the machine and harvest them all at once. Yes?
And they do tend to be earlier, don't they? I think the determinants.
Earliest ones are determinants. You can get late determinants too, but the earliest, so I use a few determinate tomatoes just for that reason, just to have that early one. Although the best way to get early tomatoes is to use water cozies or cozy coats. Have you ever seen those?
Yeah, my brother uses those.
Oh, they work so well. So while there's still snow on the ground, you get this. It is plastic, but it's a set of little tubes sewn together that are empty, and it makes a cone. So it's a cone you put over your plant. So I have a tomato cage that I put over the. As soon as you can get something into the soil that's not too frozen, or you can put them in now and they'll be frozen in place. And you put that, and then you put the cozy coat over it, and then you have to fill each little tube. There's probably like 12 of them with the, and then they tend to be red because tomatoes, red is a magic color for plants, and it is for laser healing and stuff. Mitochondria, it's red is interesting, but and that will heat up that spot, the soil.
Mhm.
And so if you do that a month ahead of time, you're going to have nice warm soil that's already come alive, and all the bacteria, the ecosystem is thriving and moving around. And then you start your tomatoes inside, and when you transplant it, you might have to move that water thing out of the way. It's a little awkward. Put it there and then put the water thing back, and you'll have tomatoes. You could easily have tomatoes outside 6 weeks ahead of everybody else, if you want. Yep.
I lost you on that. So you have the tomato cage in the ground from the year before, let's say.
Wire just to support the framework of the plastic cone.
Okay, so the cone goes down to the ground and is filled with water and heats up. I'm not
Cone is made out of a series of little tubes. I'm sorry, it's like you almost have to Google cozy coats. And
okay, cozy coats.
Most big catalogs, mail order catalogs, will have them in the back. There's many varieties of brand names, but it's kind of hard to describe. But it's like sewn to, it's like almost like a quilt of a bunch of little tubes sewn together in a cone shape.
And
you
so
put it with wire empty.
They're filled with water?
It's empty. You fold them up for the winter. You have the wire cage. You put that over the wire cage. That's just because if you don't have that while you're trying to fill it up, it tends to flop over and make a big mess.
Mary, I'm just trying to understand the mechanism of how the soil is heating up faster, 6 weeks faster. Okay,
because the water retains heat.
Right.
It's like a little miniature greenhouse, and it has an opening at the top to let out excessive heat, which is very handy. The bottom part fits to the ground. So it's basically a little greenhouse with a whole lot of water, and thermal massive water holds heat well.
Thank you.
That's simple. Sorry. Yes?
And if you put it in now, freezing doesn't damage it?
You don't put the plastic out now. If you just want to put the wire in cage, choose where you want your tomato plant, put the wire cage in place and just leave it for the winter. That way you can put the plastic on while the ground's still frozen. This will thaw.
But there's frost for quite a while. But will it damage it at all?
No, if you just have a wire tomato cage, that's all you leave out over winter.
Okay.
Not the plastic part.
All right.
And then that way, because if you wanted to start it super early next year, if the ground's frozen, you can't put the tomato cage into the ground. The metal. Just a traditional, and that's just a framework because those little things are floppy until you fill them all up. Then they help, but in the big wind they'll fall over if they don't have that support underneath. And then in the spring, as soon as you feel like it, you can go out, and it is cold fingers and you have to pour water. I put hot water in my watering can to take it out there, because you always spill a little bit when you're filling them. But you do that once and then just walk away, and you can stick your hand in there because it does have an opening at the top, almost like a teepee with an opening at the top. And you can, when you think the ground is fairly warm, or if you have a thermometer, you can check it. Then you can put out you can even plant seeds, tomato seeds if you want, because the season would be long enough to grow. But you'd be better off to start your own seeds inside and then put them out as sets. And then that first frost that comes along, the tomatoes in there will be just happy. You know, if it's -5 or above, they won't bother them inside because they're pretty good. It's kind of fun. You can do that with peppers as well, or anything you want. Especially in our climate, we have, and I don't do it from a whole crop. I usually have 1 or 2 just for the special early treat, but you can do whatever you want. So tomatoes are pretty easy to save seed from because they do tend to self-pollinate 90% of the time. So you can have different tomato varieties in your garden and not get too much crossover. It's not 100%. If you want 100%, then you have to be a little more careful and have one variety and no others in except in another garden. Lost my train of thought. Sorry. Oh yes. Now you'll see online a whole bunch of stuff about how you have to mold, let them rot in the mold to the tomato seeds. Tomato seeds are covered with this special coating that keeps them from sprouting until next spring. And if you want to keep them in the house and not in the soil, or the bacteria will work on them and mold and stuff, then when you plant them in the spring, a certain number of them won't germinate unless you go through this place where you let them literally mold in a little jar, you let mold go, and then you rinse them off and start over. And that mold and bacterial action combination will get rid of that seed inhibition chemical layer on the tomato seed. But I don't bother because you get, you know, if you have one good tomato, that's enough seeds for me. And so I just plant 5 times more seeds in the when I'm starting them inside, and enough will grow. So you can completely skip that step, I think, unless you're trying to do it on a commercial level where you need every, you know, large volumes. But on a home level, just realize that not every, when you get them in a package, that they've already been treated like that from a company. But if you're saving your own, realize that some of them aren't going to sprout, and sometimes they all sprout anyway for unknown reasons, you know. So, but it's always hard when if you plant 10 seeds and you only want 5 plants, to have to destroy those other little babies, you know, in March when they're so precious. But that's the way it goes. So that tomatoes are super simple that way. And another easy one is lettuce. I pulled this out of my garden. So this is just some spring lettuce that I let bolt. And you can see the little fluffy things. That's what Pam was talking about, because the wind will carry that away. It's kind of like the propeller on a maple seed, you know, it's wind dispersal. And these aren't very big seeds, but this isn't even all the seeds off of that one plant. This is about 1/4 off of just a small little plant. And I don't care if my lettuce is mixed, because I use a no-till, it's a permaculture system. So I try to get things to self-seed as much as possible. So I encourage my cherry tomatoes in particular, they'll self-seed and you'll still get cherry tomatoes and lettuce and stuff in kind of a haphazard function way. But it's super easy. That's just all you do. You just plant some in the spring, and when they start showing bits of fluff, that's how you know they're ready to dry. And so I would put this into a paper bag and tie a little string around the base and let it dry really, really well for a while, and then kind of bang on it and get most of the seeds to drop off. And that's threshing, technically. And if you want to winnow it, which means you get rid of the chaff, that would be getting rid of the fluff, you can. But for home consumption, I don't usually bother. So talk about easy. And I don't care if my lettuce is mixed. I'm not growing head lettuce anyway. It's all mine's loose leaf or romaine, and I'm quite happy with any lettuce the garden produces. It's all good.
Mhm.
And another really easy family is the beans and pea family, because they tend to be pretty good. They do have a Fabiaceae. Let's see, what's Fabiaceae? Let me see if I got some. Yeah, you should have to be a little bit careful about what how far apart they are, but it's not a big deal. And basically, all you do there is you just don't. If you're growing green beans, you grow dried beans, you know, for like pinto beans, dried beans, but even green beans, you just pick one good looking plant and don't pick any of the beans off of it until it dries down. Once the plant dries down or the leaves start to die, then you just bring that inside and you crack open the things and hull them, and then you have beans. And beans are very pretty to put in a jar, just bean seeds. So they're mesmerizing to play with. Now, there's many different kinds of beans, like soybeans are different species and stuff. And the infamous Scarlet runner beans, like I said, how far apart they have to be, like it's crazy, like a kilometer or something. But I can do that here because I don't have any neighbors close enough to bother. Page 32. So most of them, an isolation distance of 20 feet for your common green bean, type thing. Yes, Eleanor?
With my Scarlet runner beans, every year I keep trying to get my own seeds, and they just will not dry. They tend to.
That's because our season isn't really quite long enough for them.
Okay.
And it's a lack of heat units toward the end of the season. So you could, if you really wanted to do that, you could use a cozy coat and plant your seeds in it early, and you'd gain it easily a month on the growing season with that. So I've had a similar problem, and now I put my Scarlet runners in some kind of little warm microclimate. I have hugel beds, which are big mounds of soil and wood. So I have like I put them in where the heat is concentrated in a little microclimate.
I found that as well this year, they didn't set very well until it got cooler. When they were
very delayed,
very hot.
Everybody had that problem. For some reason, green beans this year was a spectacular year for little bush green beans. But all the vining beans didn't like that early bit of cold we had in June, and they pouted for a long time. Normally through the hot season, they just go crazy, but it took them time to recover. And again, you're right. Yeah, I've other neighbors with gardens had the same pattern. So weird.
I find that Scarlet runners just sulk and go hysterical when it's too hot.
Yes, that's probably true. Yes, if you water them well, and they have a little bit of shade, they might do better. Like vegetable gardens, a lot of things don't really like to grow in a full sun vegetable garden. Lettuce, something they do better with part shade. So you can put the ones like part shade on the edge that might get the afternoon shade from a tree or something. But most of them do fine on 6 hours of sunlight, and we have in the winter. I mean, it's in the summertime we have lots. Yes.
What about Swiss chard? Will it see?
Swiss chard.
I have some beautiful Swiss chard still growing, and I'm still using it.
Yeah. Well, it's a beet. It's actually a variety of beet, believe it or not.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah, and so it's a biennial. And if you just either dig up some of the roots when the plant goes dormant in the fall, or leave them in the garden with heavy mulch on top, there's a good chance they'll winter over. But you need at least 6 inches of heavy mulch, not just a skiff. That's why I say I like to get the bags of leaves and just put it in the bag, just put a whole bag on them. And in the spring, it's very easy to move it over, and I'll use those leaves for something else.
Yeah, I have had some winter over and start to go again.
They will occasionally if they're in just the right spot, and sometimes that's where the snow drifts. If they had a big heavy snow drift on top of them and they didn't get too cold, that kind of thing. So they're very easy. You just have to. It's a biennial though.
Okay.
Next year you can see.
Okay.
And if you have the pretty ones with the colored stems, the bright series, or do you have the green stem?
Just the grow. They're white. The stems are kind of white.
White, yeah. Okay, then, yeah, they should do fine. Yeah, you might have a slightly different variety next year, but it won't be big. It'll be yummy. It'll be good, and you'll know that it's suitable and is easy to winter over here in terms of getting seed, because obviously, yeah. So with beans, again, that's the 20 feet, 6 meters for a regular bean. There's a list here for chickpeas, lentils, lima beans, mung beans, broad beans are all unique, you know. And peas are pretty good. And peas are funny because even before they open, they've usually cross-pollinated themselves anyway. Why bother? But the cross-pollination is possible, but it's not very common. So peas you can save, even if it's the kind of, you know, like the kind that has the edible pod. Just wait, just choose a few and just let until the plant dies down midsummer or whenever it is, and then just put them in a big bowl and sit in front of a good show and pot them out at home. And then you want to spread them out on a cookie sheet for a while to make sure they're good and dry. This summer it was so humid for a long time, you wouldn't have been able to dry seeds at my house in the summer without using a dehydrator, because I had trouble getting my clothes to dry on the line. Or when it was raining and I had to try to dry them inside on the drying rack, it took 3 days for my clothes to dry. It was like humid, right? So seeds don't keep well unless they're really well dried. But you don't want to heat them to dry them. You just want them dried. So that's and peas and beans, the bigger seeds take a little bit longer to dry just because of their size. Little ones dry faster. So that's kind of gives you a vague idea. I think the best thing that came out of this is getting those books at the library. Yeah, I thought that's an awesome idea. Matter of fact, if they have an updated edition, I'll buy one too. It has a little section in the front about, you know, basic botany, what the pollen thing looks like. It even has, I like this one, it has a origami on how to make your own seed packets out of a piece of paper.
Oh, cool.
That's great. That would be really fun to do when we can do hands-on people activities again.
Yeah. And I know from the Takuma Seed Exchange that people are starting to bring them in that kind of thing. Just the plastic is nice as you can see what the seed looks like, but you know, this is better. You can just use an old recycled something, you know, piece of, you never print on it, doesn't matter.
Very cool.
And when you store them, don't just put them in a shed where it's going to get hot in the summer. So if you have a big volume of seeds and you're not using them all up, you want to maybe you can put them outside in the shed in the cool weather. It'll let them freeze. That's not a problem, but they can't get too hot in the summer. And a lot of old garden sheds get way too hot and people lose their seed because of that. Yes, Eleanor.
Does that book only cover vegetables, or does it cover?
This one is specifically vegetables. Well, technically, tomatoes are a fruit, you know. But yes, this isn't doing a whole lot of the other kinds of things. But there's lots of good ways to look at that, and every flower is different. I have this wonderful book upstairs. It's very expensive though. It's about this thick, about how to propagate almost anything you could ever, you know, and that includes cuttings and rootstock and stuff like that. Grafting. Grafting's fun too.